The morning my son-in-law put a padlock on the garage and told me I didn't need access to that space anymore, I didn't say a word. I just walked back inside, sat down at my kitchen table in my house that I paid off 22 years ago, and stared at the wall until my coffee went cold. That was 8 months before everything fell apart. 8 months before I came home from my sister's funeral to find my belongings stacked in garbage bags on the front porch. 8 months before my daughter stood in the doorway of the home I built and told me, with her husband's hand on her shoulder, that this arrangement wasn't working anymore. They didn't notice that I'd left the side window cracked open when I left for the funeral. They didn't notice a lot of things about me. They never did. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go back to where it really started. My name is June. No, wait. That's wrong. I've been calling myself that in my head for so long. The name my mother gave me. The name my husband whispered the night he proposed in a parking lot outside a Cracker Barrel in Knoxville, because we couldn't afford anything fancier. My name is Wanda. Wanda Louise Pruitt. And I am 67 years old, and I own a 3-bedroom house on Callaway Street in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and I want to tell you what almost happened to it. My husband, Ray, not the Ray on that list they keep somewhere, a different Ray, my Ray, he passed 11 years ago from a stroke, went to bed fine on a Tuesday, didn't wake up Wednesday. We had 31 years together. I won't pretend they were all perfect, because they weren't, but they were ours. When he died, he left me the house, a small life insurance policy, and a daughter named Meredith, who was 32 years old and already married to a man I had never fully trusted. His name was Cole. Cole Hargrove. He sold pharmaceutical equipment and made decent money doing it, and he carried himself like a man who knew exactly how much he was worth and wanted you to know it too. Meredith loved him. She lit up around him the way I used to light up around Ray, and because I remembered what that felt like, I kept my mouth shut. They lived 40 minutes away in a nice subdivision. I saw them most Sundays. It was enough. Then Meredith lost her job. She'd been a dental hygienist for 9 years at the same practice, and the dentist retired and sold to a corporate group that brought in their own staff. She wasn't laid off exactly, she was not retained. She came over that Sunday and cried at my table, and I held her hand and told her she'd find something better. She was good at her work. She would be fine. What I didn't know was that Cole had also, quietly, been having a bad year. 3 of his biggest accounts had gone to a competitor. His commissions were down. They had credit card debt I didn't know about. They had a car payment on a truck he'd bought at the height of his confidence that they could no longer really afford. I found all of this out later. At the time, all I knew was that Meredith called me one Thursday evening, voice careful and practiced, and said she and Cole had been talking, and they were wondering. Just wondering. Just a thought. Whether it might make sense for them to move in with me for a little while, just until they both got back on their feet. 6 months, maybe 8, they'd contribute to the utilities, they'd help around the house. It would be company for me. I was lonely. That was the truth of it. The house was quiet in a way that still surprised me some mornings. I'd hear a sound from another room, and for half a second I'd think it was Ray, and then I'd remember, and the quiet would come back heavier than before. I said yes. I told myself it would be good. I told myself Meredith was my daughter, and this was what families did. I told myself Cole couldn't be as bad as the little voice in the back of my head always said he was. They moved in on a Saturday in March. I helped them carry boxes. I made chili for dinner. We sat around the table, and it felt, for one night, like something warm and right. It started small. That's always how it starts, isn't it? Not with a slam, but with a slow leak. Cole decided the guest bathroom needed new fixtures because the faucet dripped. Fair enough. Except he picked the fixtures without asking me, bought the expensive ones, and handed me the receipt for the household budget. I paid it. I didn't say anything. Meredith reorganized the pantry because, she said, the way I had it made it hard to find things. I'd had it that way for 20 years. I came down one morning and couldn't find my oatmeal. It was behind a row of protein powder Cole had bought in bulk. They got a dog. A large dog. A 110-pound Rottweiler mix named Tank that Cole had apparently always wanted and that Meredith had apparently agreed to without thinking about the fact that they were living in someone else's house. The dog knocked over my mother's lamp in the first week. Cole said he'd replace it. He never did. The living room television got replaced. Cole said the old one wasn't really compatible with the streaming setup he wanted. He bought a new one and mounted it on the wall, and for 3 weeks the old television, the one Ray and I had bought together, the one we'd watched the World Series on, the one I'd fallen asleep in front of on the night of Ray's funeral because I couldn't make myself go upstairs, sat in the garage. Then one day it was gone. Cole said he'd taken it to Goodwill. He hadn't asked. I mentioned it to Meredith. Casually. I said I wished someone had checked with me first. She looked genuinely surprised. Mom, it was just taking up space. Like my feelings about an object were the irrational part of the conversation. 8 months in, 6 months passed when they were supposed to leave. I made the mistake of asking how the job search was going. Cole's face did something I hadn't seen it do before. Something cold moved behind his eyes. We're working on it, he said. It takes time. We're doing our best. And then, slowly, evenly, it would really help if we didn't feel pressure on top of everything else. After that, asking felt dangerous. So I stopped asking. My bedroom is at the end of the hall. I'd always kept the door open because the house was mine and I didn't need to close myself in. But after Tank started sleeping in the hallway and after Cole started working from home and taking calls that apparently required him to walk the entire length of the house at high volume, I started closing my door and then locking it. That's when I realized what had happened. I had made myself small inside my own home. I had started eating dinner earlier to avoid sitting at the table with them. I had started watching television on my laptop in my room instead of the living room. I had started keeping my good dishes in my closet because the last time I'd left them in the cabinet, 2 of the plates had come back chipped. I want to be honest with you, I was afraid. Not afraid of being hit, not yet, but afraid of something slippery and hard to name. Afraid of the look on Cole's face when I pushed back on anything. Afraid of what Meredith would say if I told her how I really felt. Afraid that if I said the wrong thing, they would leave, and then I would be alone, and the quiet would come back. That fear is the thing I am most ashamed of now. The first time Cole raised his voice at me, it was about the water heater. I had turned it down because my energy bill was running nearly double what it used to, and he came into the kitchen where I was washing dishes and told me I couldn't just unilaterally change things that affect everyone in the house. I turned around and looked at him. Cole, I said, this is my house. He took a breath through his nose. His jaw tightened. Wanda, he said, and the way he said my name, not Mrs. Pruitt, not Mom, Wanda, flat and cold, that attitude is exactly why this living situation is so difficult. I turned back to the dishes. My hands were shaking. I didn't say anything else. I told my sister Harriet about it the next time I saw her. She lived in Chattanooga. She was older than me by 4 years and had never liked Cole, not from the beginning. Wanda, she said, that man is running a con and you are the mark. I told her she was being dramatic. She shook her head. I hope I'm wrong, she said. I genuinely hope I'm wrong. Harriet died in November. Pancreatic cancer. She was diagnosed in September and gone by the 11th of November, and I didn't get to say everything I needed to say because the last week she wasn't really there anymore. Not in the way that would have mattered. I drove to Chattanooga for the funeral. I was gone 4 days. When I came home, I used my key in the front door, and it didn't work. I stood on my own porch, in the cold, with my overnight bag, and my key did not open my front door. I tried it again. I checked the key. I tried again. The deadbolt was different. New hardware, shiny, not the old brass I'd had since 1998. I rang the doorbell. Cole answered. He was in a good mood, which was somehow worse. "Oh, hey," he said. "Yeah, we had a locksmith out. There was a situation with a neighbor kid messing around in the yard, and we thought it made sense to upgrade the locks. I kept meaning to get you a key made. He hadn't. I walked inside and went straight to my room and sat on the edge of my bed and breathed. My own house. My key did not work in my own house. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in the dark, and I thought about Harriet saying I was the mark, and I thought about all the small things that had accumulated over 8 months. And I thought about the lock on the garage, and the television that went to Goodwill, and the receipt for the bathroom fixtures. And Cole saying Mrs. Difficult when I mentioned the water heater? I thought, what are they planning? I got up at 2 in the morning and went to my filing cabinet. I keep my important papers there. The deed to the house, my will, my financial accounts. I opened the bottom drawer. My deed was not there. I went through every folder. Twice. 3 times. My hands moving faster and faster. Not there. The deed to my house, the original deed, the document with my name on it, and Ray's name on it from 1991 was not in my filing cabinet. I sat on the floor in the dark and I didn't cry. I think I was too scared to cry. I just sat there and I thought, I have to get out of this house. I waited until I heard Cole snoring down the hall. Then I packed a bag. I packed my medication, my social security card, my passport, 2 changes of clothes, the small cedar box where I keep Ray's watch, and the cash I kept in an envelope in my winter coat pocket. $340. I put on my shoes. I picked up my bag. I walked down the hall, past Meredith's closed door, past the room where my grandchildren would have slept if I'd had any, through the living room with the television I hadn't chosen, and I walked out the side door. The neighbor across the street, a woman named Bev, one of those people who waters her flowers at 6 in the morning and always waves, had given me her number 2 years ago after I'd had a small health scare, and she'd said, "Call me if you need anything, I mean it." I had never called her. I called her at 2:30 in the morning. She answered on the second ring. I told her I was sorry to wake her. She told me to come over right now. She met me at her door in a bathrobe with the porch light on, and when she saw my face, she didn't ask a single question. She just stepped back and let me in. I sat at her kitchen table while she made tea, and then I told her everything, from the beginning, from the Sunday chili dinner in March, all the way to the 2:30 moment when I discovered my deed was gone. Bev listened. She didn't interrupt. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "My nephew is a real estate attorney," she said. "His name is Patrick. I'm going to text him right now and tell him you need to talk to him first thing in the morning. It's 3 in the morning, Bev." "I know. He can read it when he wakes up." She picked up her phone and started typing. "You're not going back to that house tonight." I slept in her guest room. I don't know how, but I slept. Patrick called at 7:45 the next morning. He had a quick, precise voice and he asked good questions. I answered all of them. When I got to the part about the deed, he was quiet for a moment. "Mrs. Pruitt," he said, "I want you to understand something. The deed being removed from your home doesn't change legal ownership. Your name is on record with the county. What concerns me is the intent. If someone has taken that deed, they may be planning to use it, to try to file paperwork, to forge something, to create confusion about ownership. It happens. We need to move quickly." He asked me if I had any evidence of what was happening. I thought about it. I told him about the lock being changed without my knowledge. He said that was actually significant. Changing locks in a property you don't own without the owner's consent could be considered unlawful exclusion. I told him about the receipts Cole had handed me. I told him about the bank account, and then I stopped, because I remembered something. 2 months ago, Cole had asked me to add him to my bank account. Just for emergencies, he'd said. Just so we can help you with bills if something happens. I had said I'd think about it. I hadn't done it, but he had asked. And I had a feeling that if I checked my account right now, something would be wrong. I called my bank from Bev's kitchen. I was on hold for 11 minutes. When the representative came on and I gave my information and asked about recent changes to my account, she said, "I'm showing an attempt to add an authorized user about 3 weeks ago. It was flagged and not processed because the secondary ID didn't match our records. Someone had tried to add themselves to my account 3 weeks ago, while I was still living in my own house, eating dinner early to avoid sitting at the table with them. Patrick said we had enough to go to a judge," he said, "with the changed locks, which legally constituted a form of lockout, and the attempted account access and the missing deed, we could request an emergency order compelling them to vacate. He said it could happen within 48 hours if the judge agreed it was urgent. I told him to do whatever needed to be done. The hearing was the next afternoon. I wore my good gray cardigan, the one I wore to Ray's funeral and to Harriet's both, because I needed to feel like something held me together." Patrick was calm and methodical. He laid out every piece of evidence: the bank's records of the attempted account change, the locksmith's work order, which Patrick had already subpoenaed, a statement from Bev about the condition I arrived in at 2:30 in the morning. The judge was a woman, maybe 50, with reading glasses on a chain. She listened. She looked at the documents. She asked Cole's name and wrote it down. Then she looked up at me over her glasses and said, "Mrs. Pruitt, do you want your home back?" "Yes, ma'am," I said. "I do." She signed the order. What I didn't know, what Patrick told me in the parking lot afterward was something that looked almost like a smile, was that Meredith and Cole had been home all day. They had not gone to work. They had not gone to work. They had not gone out. They had been home, and according to Bev's text updates, there were 2 cars in my driveway that didn't belong to me, and music playing loud enough to hear from the street. And at one point a truck had pulled up, and 2 men had carried something out of my house and put it in the truck. "What did they take?" I asked. Patrick shook his head. "That's what we're about to find out." We arrived at my house at 4:15 in the afternoon. 1 patrol car, then a second. Patrick with his briefcase, an officer I'll call Deputy Cruz, who had a slow drawl and very steady eyes and introduced himself to me like I was a person deserving of courtesy, which in that moment meant more than I can explain. There were 3 vehicles in my driveway. One was Cole's truck, one I recognized as belonging to Cole's brother. The third I didn't know. Deputy Cruz knocked on my door. 3 times. The music stopped. Then footsteps and the door opened, and it was Cole in a t-shirt holding a beer at 4 in the afternoon, and his face when he saw the uniforms was something I will remember for a very long time. "What's going on?" His voice was still easy, still controlled. He was a man who believed he could talk his way through most things. Deputy Cruz said, "Sir, we have a court order. This property belongs to Wanda Pruitt. You and anyone else in this residence need to step outside." Cole looked past the deputy and saw me. Something crossed his face. Not guilt. Calculation. "Wanda," he said. "Wanda, come on. This is ridiculous. We can talk about this. You didn't have to involve police. Meredith is inside. She's going to be devastated." "Sir," Deputy Cruz said, "I need you to step outside, please." Meredith appeared behind him. She had been crying, or she made herself look like she had been crying. Even now, I'm not sure which. "Mom," she said. "Mom, please. We're family. This is not how family handles things." And there it was. The thing that had kept me small and quiet for 8 months. We're family. As if family were a reason to accept anything. As if love were a blank check for however much a person decided to take. I looked at my daughter. I had carried her, raised her, held her hand at her father's funeral. I loved her with the kind of love that doesn't have an off switch, and I knew I would love her until I died. But I had learned, in a cold filing room at 2 in the morning, that love was not the same thing as surrender. "Meredith," I said, "this is my house. I need you to go." She cried. It was real crying this time, I believe that. She cried and she looked at me like I had done something to her, like I was the one who had changed the locks, who had tried to access her account, who had taken something that wasn't mine. Cole's brother came out from inside. He had clearly been in the middle of something. He was carrying a box, my mother's good china, wrapped in newspaper. Deputy Cruz held out a hand. "Sir, I'm going to need you to set that down." The brother set it down. His face went red. "We were just packing some things for safekeeping," he said. "That'll be for the court to sort out," the deputy said. "Right now I need everyone to step away from the property." It took 40 minutes. 40 minutes of back and forth, and Meredith crying and Cole making phone calls on the porch, and the brother standing by his car with his arms crossed like he was being wronged. My neighbors had come out by then. Bev was on her porch. The man from next door stood in his yard. People I'd waved at for 20 years watched my son-in-law get walked off my property by a sheriff's deputy. When the last car left, I stood in my driveway alone. Deputy Cruz handed me 2 keys. "New locks are already on order, ma'am. A locksmith will be out tomorrow morning. Court arranged. Tonight? These will get you in." He paused. "I'm sorry this happened to you." I thanked him. I think I thanked him. My voice wasn't quite working right. I stood in the driveway for another minute. The late afternoon light was coming through the maple tree I'd planted the year Meredith was born, throwing long shadows across the yard. The house looked the same from outside. It always looks the same from outside. It always looks the same from outside. I went in. They had not taken the china, thanks to the deputy, but they had taken the small television from my bedroom, the one I'd used for 30 years. They had taken a piece of artwork from the hallway, a watercolor of the Smoky Mountains that Ray had bought from a woman at a craft fair on our anniversary. They had taken several items from the garage I was still discovering for weeks afterward. I called Patrick. He told me to make a list. He told me the missing items would be part of a civil claim. He told me that Cole's attempted account access, combined with the missing deed, was likely enough for a fraud investigation. He told me these things happen, and that I had handled it correctly, and that I should change my banking passwords tonight. Then I put the phone down and I sat in my living room, in a chair I had chosen, in my house, and I let myself feel it. Grief, mostly. That surprised me. I had expected relief, or anger, or satisfaction at the 4:15 look on Cole's face. Instead, I sat there grieving for Meredith, for what we had been before this, for the version of my daughter that had sat at this table with me when she was 8 years old, doing homework while I made dinner. I didn't know yet if I'd get her back. I didn't know if what happened could be undone or just carried. Bev came over with food she'd made. She let herself in the back door, which I'd propped open, and she put the food on the counter without saying anything about it. And then she came and sat across from me. "How are you?" she asked. "Sad," I said, relieved. "I don't know." "Both," she said. "Both is right." I ate. I slept in my own bed. The quiet was the same as it had always been, but it felt different now. Not the quiet of absence, but the quiet of something chosen. 3 weeks later, Meredith called me from a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. I answered. She was staying with a friend. Cole and she were taking some space, she said. Her voice was different from the voice she'd used standing behind him in the doorway. Smaller, more like the voice I remembered. She didn't apologize right away. She talked around the edges. She said she knew things had gotten out of hand. She said Cole had made some decisions she hadn't known about, and she was sorting through what that meant. She sounded like someone who had believed she was part of something and was slowly understanding she'd also been used. I listened. I didn't tell her everything I felt. But I told her I loved her, and I told her the door wasn't closed, and I told her the door wasn't closed, and I told her it would take time. I know, she said. I mean a lot of time, Meredith. A pause. I know, Mom. I went to bed that night and thought about Harriet, about how she'd said Cole was running a con, about how I'd told her she was being dramatic. I wished I could call her. I wished I could say, you were right, and I should have listened, and I'm sorry I didn't. That's the thing about losing people. You can't finish the conversations. You just have to carry the weight of what was left unsaid. But I'm here. I'm still here, in my house, in my chair by the window where I've always sat. I am 67 years old. I am a widow and a homeowner and a woman who waited too long to say enough, and then said it anyway. I lost 8 months to silence. I lost a watercolor painting and a television, and some trust I may never fully recover. But I have this house. I have Bev across the street. I have Patrick's number in my phone. I have the knowledge, which I intend never to lose again, that my name is on the deed. The deed is on record with the county, and this is my home. Nobody is ever taking that from me again.